Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to Radio Works World and my show, Light-Hearted Conversations with People of Significance. And today, my very special guest is Mark Anthony Clark. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jill. Good afternoon, good evening, good night. I always get that bit mixed up. Good afternoon, good evening, good night, good morning, wherever you are in Radio Works World. Hiya.
So, Mark, thank you very much for joining my light-hearted conversation. Hopefully, we're going to have a very nice time together. Yeah, of course we are. Now, just to tell the viewers that Mark has no clue what I'm going to ask him. Do you, Mark? No.
No, I'm worried.
So this is a bit of an adventure,
Okay.
but before I am going to ask you some questions, I'd like you to share with us, Mark, your background and what you do currently, please.
Okay, so my background is that, well, I might as well go forwards and then come back. I run a charity called the Walk to Freedom, where we support people with drug and alcohol issues. We do training for people who work with people who have drug and alcohol issues, or we help families and give awareness courses for people who have a user in the home but have never been a user themselves. And we also have a youth program where we work with young people who are on the borders of exclusion or are getting into gangs. And from there, I've kind of evolved into doing my new branding, which is called the I Am Possible, where I do life coaching, public speaking. Well, I like to call it public communication, where we communicate with people to help them to actually realize they have these potentials. Because sometimes I think that when we tell people they're great, when we tell people that they're phenomenal and all the rest of it, sometimes if you've lived a life where all you've been told that is you're not that, you build up a bit of an immune system. So what we do with that is we help people to realize that you have all this interpersonal inside of you and power that you can use to become a possible person. So for me, that's been my life's work, because I was somebody who was that. You know, for years, I was the bullied school kid. I was the young person whose family was in domestic violence on me, my mum and my brothers. I grew up in a life of crime, which ended up a life in addiction. So for a very long time, I had all of those negative things going on with myself. And then I decided to turn it around. So I've decided now to help people do the same in any walk of life. And I love it.
And you are really good at what you do too. I have connected with you and I've seen you. You're a very powerful speaker from stage.
Thank you. Yeah, yes, sorry, go on.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to say was that, you know, it's very important to me for this series is that I'm talking to people and they are people of significance, and you are making a significant difference to people's lives because you've been in their shoes, haven't you?
Oh yeah, definitely through many different areas, you know. But I believe that, you know, the symptoms can be different, but the root issues that we all go through, we can all relate to. So I look at it that if I can come through one of the hardest symptoms, which is addiction, and transfer that into helping people in any walk of life, I think I've got a lot to offer. That's why I'm so passionate about what I do, because I love to empower people to take back their lives.
And what's really interesting for me is that, you know, I deal with addiction to sugar.
Yeah.
So because my business is all about health and helping people to get healthy. But they say that actually sugar is more addictive than cocaine. That if you put the experiments with mice, for example, that if you give mice that are dependent on cocaine and you take away the cocaine and you also take away sugar, if you put sugar and cocaine back into their environment, it's the sugar that they go for rather than the it's the sugar first rather than the cocaine. I'm not saying that you should replace one for the other, but it is really powerful. Is that addictions are not only about those substances that we kind of think of, like alcohol and illegal highs or drugs or whatever they are, but they can be also to do with, as I say, what you're putting in your mouth in terms of sugar and also the addictions to gambling and to sex and whatever else it might be.
Yeah, because a lot of that actually happens in the experimental stage of using any substance, no matter what it is, that feels good or tastes good or looks good, or when you do it makes you feel good. So with sugar, what most likely happens is because there's such a less of a consequence. I mean, hardly any consequence really, but you still begin to continue to trust how this thing makes you feel, the sweetness, the taste of it, and you have no consequences, then it's less likely that you're going to want to stop it. So when you have cocaine now, because there's a downside to it and there's a coming down, you're more likely then to believe more about the consequences. So with the mice, they most probably went, oh, I've got a bit of a come down with this at the moment, so I'm not going to use it. But with the sugar, there's no consequence whatsoever. So you're most likely to go to the thing that has the least consequences.
But of course, you know, from an immediate consequence, which is this up and down. So whether that's a blood sugar high or a cocaine high and a low, the issue that we've got in this global health crisis of obesity and heart disease, which we now of course know is down to sugar and not fat. It is completely down to sugar. So though there's none of that immediate consequence in the same way, we have a much greater consequence. But of course, by the time, it's almost more dangerous, because by the time you get there, the damage has been done for so many years.
Exactly. You see, on our program, what we look at in this is we look at what denial does to somebody, and how the longer it persists, the longer you're able to actually make a lie sound like a truth and a truth sound like a lie. Because you will enable yourself, because the sugar or the drugs or the alcohol will meet some kind of need. So when you're thinking about this thing and you measure that, it's got a lack of consequence at the most, at the time. I've frozen how I feel about it, really, because it's allowing me to meet a need. We continue to do it. You know, in our program, we help people to understand that you're the last person to see yourself as you're heading into these dangerous addictions. So what happens in, like, particularly with sugar, because you've got to look at the whole psychosocial disorder of it all, where you're looking at it's readily available. You don't see many people sort of robbing and stealing for it. And we use all of these things in our minds to actually justify using it until it's too late.
Yeah.
And that's the mad thing about it.
And it's really interesting as well, is because within the family, and particularly as mothers, is that we use sugar as a reward. We're not going to use cocaine as a reward, hopefully. But, you know, in our traditionally for the last however many years, it's seen as, well, you can have sweeties if you're a good boy or you're a good girl, and I'm going to make you a cake, and, you know, let's go and have a takeaway, because it produces that wonderful feeling, doesn't it?
Exactly. It's again, I think it all boils down to, because again, in our courses, what we look at is the history of the substance. And so if we were to, like, we don't look at sugar, but if we were to look at sugar, we look back then, there was a lot less known about it then, and the consequences of it then, that it was just readily available to use for a completely different reason. But as science has progressed, as testing has progressed, as we've seen, like you said, obesity getting worse, and we're relating it back to sugar. We're actually now trying to deal with it in a way that we should have been dealing with it years ago. But yeah, like you said, you know, it's and again, once we have that knowledge of history about it being part of a reward system, again, that allows us to justify ourselves. You know, you'll hear a lot of people say, oh, I feel like this, so I'm going to eat a piece of chocolate. Yeah. You know, because we've already justified it in history that it's okay to do it. So we're not going to look at the consequence again until it's too late.
Yeah, yeah. It's fascinating stuff, isn't it? Really.
Oh,
really
I love all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Anyway, so you've told us what you do, but this next part of our time together is learning a little bit about Mark, and what Mark likes, and what Mark does, and what Mark feels. So I'm going to paint a few scenarios for you. Okay. So this first one is, I'd like you to imagine that you've stepped into a lift in a big hotel, and you're going up to the executive suite, of course, because Mark, that's where you would be staying, clearly.
Of course.
Of course. And there's one other person that gets in the lift with you, but you get up to between floor, say 6 and 7, and the lift breaks down.
Okay.
Okay. Now, feelings of claustrophobia aside, because we're going to give you a window to look outside.
Okay.
My question to you is, if you were in that lift and you've been told that you're going to be in there for a couple of hours, you are going to be rescued, but you're going to be in the couple of hours, who would that person that you got into a lift with, who would that person be? Who would you choose to spend 2 hours with, from either dead or alive, anybody that you'd like to think, I'd love to get them in a room for 2 hours and ask them all the questions that you want to know?
Do you know something? I was asked this question this morning.
That's weird.
I was asked by a friend this morning this very same question, and they put a post up, but they asked for 2 people, but it wasn't the same scenario. So
Right.
I'm going to, the first person actually, no, the second person I actually said was King Solomon.
Okay, that's an interesting one. Why?
Because of his wisdom.
Okay.
Because for me personally on my journey, the key thing for me is to get understanding.
Yeah.
Okay, understanding of the situation, understanding of the people that I'm working with, understanding of the business that I'm getting into, understanding what it takes for a person to change their life around. So the first thing I was ever taught was to get understanding.
Yeah.
Now, King Solomon, from what I've read about him, whether it's theologically or read about him in the Bible, he was a very wise man, but it wasn't his wisdom in, how can I put it? He wasn't profoundly wise that he could see into the future or he could tell people what they're doing. It wasn't anything like that. He was very wise in how he handled situations.
Mm.
You know, there's one story of when two women were, one wife was a man married 2 women, and the man died, and the 2 women were arguing over the child. Okay, because back then, you know, the child could live with either of the family. So King Solomon basically said, well, the only way you're going to sort this out is to cut the child in half. So, but what he did then, because he was king, he put them in that position where they had to come to a solution.
Yeah. I can see how that might. I can see how that kind of logic might appeal to you, Mark.
Yeah, it seems like, okay, if you really want me to deal with this, we'll cut the child in half.
Yeah. So you need to grow up and make a decision yourself, basically.
Exactly.
Well, isn't that
he was like,
interesting?
why are you bringing this to me? So I love the way how he viewed how to deal with life. In the Bible, he wrote. Sorry, go on.
And conflict.
Yeah. In the Bible, he wrote Ecclesiastes. You know, and I love at the beginning how he said it's all meaningless. He said, meaningless, meaningless, meaningless. I have seen everything in the world, and I've just come to this one decision. It's all meaningless. And I realized that it's about living in the moment, which has the most meaning. And I would love to just talk with him about how these profound words of wisdom of how to understand life and to deal with life he came about. You know, I know a lot of people say, oh, I want to meet Bob Marley, Mandela, all these. Not me. I would like to meet these guys who actually governed wisely, who actually led people wisely. Don't get me wrong, they weren't perfect. They made some big mistakes, but yeah, King Solomon would be one.
Okay, all right. That's a fabulous answer. So in your lovely lift, you have a table that's laid out with a very beautiful tablecloth and the best fine china and silverware and crockery.
Okay.
And I'm going to magic you up like Harry Potter. I'm going to magic you up your favorite meal that you're going to share with King Solomon. What would that be?
Oh my gosh. Well, it'll have to be a West Indian dish.
Mm-hmm.
It would be oxtail, stewed oxtail.
Yeah.
With butter beans, rice and peas.
Of course.
With with coleslaw and salad. Would we have a starter? Yeah, the starter would have to be nice and simple. Prawn cocktail, because I have a prawn cocktail. Afterwards would have to be rum and raisin ice cream.
Okay.
And for drink, for the libations to wash it all down with,
Yeah.
it would have to be again West Indian Guinness punch.
Okay, you'll have to make me one of those one day.
Oh, definitely, you'll love it. But then again, it's clouded in sugar.
Yes.
It's got condensed milk in.
I've got so small amount of it.
You have to take a day off from that.
Yeah, take it off. Yes, that's fabulous. That's one of the most complete answers I've had. That's absolutely great. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is talk about the 18-year-old Mark. So when you were 18, Mark, where were you? What you were doing? What was life like for you at 18?
Oh my gosh! When I was 18 years of age, I was going through a bit of a transition. Where I left school with absolutely nothing. Left school with absolutely nothing. No exams, no exams completed, nothing. And at 18, I did try to work. I did. The first job I ever went for was called a company called Renar Antenna. And it was a big man called Mr. Stocker who run the company, and he came from up north. And what we did was we made aerials that used to go on the police radios. And it was quite easy some parts of the job, but another part of the job was where we had to use a lathe machine, and you needed both hands to use it. Now, it's kind of structured for someone who's right-handed, and I was left-handed, and I couldn't use the lathe. So I was fired because I was left-handed. So from there, I transitioned again, and I went on to what was called the YTS course, if people remember those courses.
Remember those, yeah.
I went on a YTS course, but that was more, that more became a pickup place to find new girlfriends, to be quite honest with you. That's what that became. That became a place to find new girlfriends. And then from there, I went to another job where we did what was called piecework. And you had to, you know, the belts that workmen wear and they hang their tools on them?
Yeah.
I did the holders onto them.
Right, cool.
And they showed me how to use it, but I got fired by lunchtime because I was working too hard. Because they gave me all these belts to do, and because you're getting paid per work, the guy next to me looked at me and went, "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Right? Got this box full, and I'm thinking, "Yeah, I've made some money." They call me into the office and go, "Unfortunately, we shouldn't have taken you on." So at this time, I was trying to live a life where, for me personally, I did have a love of money. I did. I, as far as I was concerned, I just wanted to earn money. All I wanted. So during that transition in my life of trying to earn money, honestly, I came across somebody who was actually my first ever motivational speaker that I ever met. And he was a gangster. and he looked at me and he said, "In this country, you get paid 12 or 52 times out of 300 and odd days a year. And you only see that money 12 or 52 times. And he pulled out this big wad of money in front of me and said, "I get my money every day and nobody takes it from me."
Wow.
And that was quite motivational. So, but what I didn't notice about the motivation that he was giving me came at a risk, because about a month or so later, he was shot in the back of the head.
Wow.
But being 18, 19 that time, I didn't think that it would happen to me. So my transition from trying to do the right thing became trying to do the wrong thing. And the wrong thing came very easy, really. So that transition I went through sort of brought me into arenas of life of crime, money. I didn't even realize I started self-medicating more with cannabis just to handle it, but everybody just saw it as recreational anyway. By that time of, 18, 19, I started doing the party drugs. I started doing ecstasy and cocaine and trips. So my life started transitioning into this delusional world where days just sort of joined up together. And then in between that, I just started committing crime. So that's where it all started. But the one thing that was the blessing to my heart is that by the time I was 19, I had my daughter. And she was the greatest thing to happen to me at that time. But by that time, my life was just going down a completely different road where I wasn't the father I should be. And I just began to throw money at everything, thinking that was the answer. So my 18 was a very transitional time.
And it's quite interesting because, you know, I've got 3 children and I've got a son, and I think, you know, boys are particularly vulnerable at that sort of age, and particularly, and you know, Definitely. The background that you described as well, coming from there, that you didn't have the tools to make good decisions at that stage. You know, you saw something that you wanted, and you went for it without really having any guidance or having any notion as to where that was going to lend you or lead you in ultimately, which is but at the same time, you also had a daughter, and you know, there's this real dichotomy here, isn't there, of responsibility and irresponsibility. Exactly.
It was hard for me because, especially when it came to my daughter, I really did want to play that position, but my over-encroaching criminal life didn't allow me to, because I think some of the things I was getting into was making me sort of aware that people use my daughter against me if they were to know certain things, you know. So I think that also allowed me to be quite vacant in her life as well.
Protecting her in a way.
Exactly, yeah. But also by that time, my drug addiction started to get worse as well. And that began to fast track things even more away from her. Just going back to, you know, living that life, you know, it was stressful. It was very, very stressful. But I think the thing that kept me in that life was that prior to that, going through what I went through, growing through adolescence, of all the dysfunction that was in my life and feeling misunderstood. You know, I think there was a day actually when I remember seeing, you know, can you imagine my dad's beating up on my brother in the back garden. My mum is trying to get in the middle of it all. And I'm standing there watching this. And then I see my dad just headbutt my mum and punch my brother to the floor. And I stand there and I remember breaking at that moment and just going, I can't take any more of this. And something happened to me around that time, because in my head, I actually said to myself, nobody's going to tell me what to do again. Because nobody's not listening to me now. Nobody's looking out for me now. So nobody's going to tell me what to do again. So I actually realized that in my thinking, my cognitive thinking became distorted. So whatever was right, was wrong was wrong, was wrong was right, and what was right was wrong, just so long as it came from me, you know? And I began to live that way, and it enabled me to sort of transition into the criminal life where I had suicidal tendencies of just believing, well, you're going to die anyway at some point, so I might as well just live this life until it happens. You know, it allowed me to just become that person who just completely changed. So yeah, it was hard as well, trying to be a dad and then not being a dad, and actually the drugs numbing me from actually thinking that way. So yeah, it was hard. It was hard. Psychologically, it was hard.
Do you remember what music you were listening to at that stage?
Wow. I can remember one particular song from back then. And it was because I used to like listening to garage music. I'd like listening to well, at the times as well, acid house and house music. But there was this one particular song in garage music, and it's by a guy called W.O.R.K.S. And the song was called The Battle.
Okay.
And what the line of the song goes, every day is like a battle, but you'll overcome. You know, when you get back in the battle, faith will overcome. And it was stuff like that that was making me realize that I'm in some kind of battle that I've got to win. Because it was tough for me, because I was always the kid on the outside. You know, I was always, even though I had a great group, I've got a great group of friends, I always felt like I never belonged. You know, growing up in school, I was the fat kid. I was that kid. I was the outsider, but I looked at it in the wrong way. And when I got myself into these battles in life, I mean, I've been shot, stabbed, gutted like a fish, gone through numerous drug addiction overdoses, suicide attempts. And I realized that all those battles in that song were actually helping me to realize that there was a greater purpose for my life.
Mm.
You know, when I used to wake up out of overdoses, I used to actually turn around and go, do you know something? If I ever get run over by the bus, I will be so upset with God, because I can't be going through this for nothing. And now that I do what I do, which was, you know, after everything I've been through was extreme. And I say to guys, you know, when you live the life I live, there's 4 outcomes: drugs, there's addiction, mental institutions, death, or prison. And I talk to guys and I tell them, you're looking at somebody who's been through all 4.
Yeah.
You know, I've been, you know, heart stopped for 4 minutes, dead because of an overdose. That when I was coming out of it, for some reason I had a heart attack. And I've been down those roads, and I've realized that out of all of them, all I've wanted to ever do is live. So that's why I take what I do. I'm going off on one here, I don't know why, but that's why I take what I do today to bring purpose into people's lives.
So let's just talk about the 35-year-old Mark then. What was Mark doing at 35?
Well, at 35, okay, so if I go to June of 1990 something.
Yeah, you don't need to tell us how old you are.
Sorry? Yeah.
You don't need to tell us how old you are. Don't give the game away, Mark.
Okay,
just tell us what you're doing.
35-year-old Mark was a 7.5 stone drug addict eating off of the streets. My addiction had got worse. I'd lost everything and everybody. My mum was brokenhearted. I had robbed. I had stolen. I had been to prison for, well, actually, prison just became occupational hazard. I had lost everything. I was eating off of the streets. I was living on the streets. I was living from hostel to hostel. If I did manage to clean myself up, I would get into relationships where eventually my addiction would come raging back at me again, and I would end up robbing and stealing from other people. My mind was gone. It was, my mind was gone. I've got something come up there. Okay. My mind was shot. It was gone. It was fragmented. I lived for the drugs and the drugs lived for me. That's all. That was the greatest relationship I had. We were like lovers, you know. Nothing came in between us. Is
that what you hear from other people with addictions?
Yeah,
similar.
Definitely. Yeah. The biggest question that I use with people now is, it was like this: why do I use when I don't want to use, and when I shouldn't use, I still do? You see, that's the torture.
Yeah.
That's the torture. Most people who use are above average intelligence. And when that intelligence has been undermined by something you're powerless over, it creates torture. It creates
guilt as well.
Depression.
It creates guilt, presumably, too.
It creates guilt, yeah. All of these things it create, you know. My reasons for overdoses wasn't because of the consequences of my using. It's because I couldn't stop and I didn't know how to. You know, and when that was happening, I just said to myself, you know what? I would rather not be here. I'd rather not embarrass myself. I'd rather not keep embarrassing my parents and my family, so I might as well be dead. And that's what that thinking kind of takes you. You know, people have this thing where they go, it's a disease, dis-ease. I want to contradict that. It's not dis-ease, it's a nightmare. It's a total nightmare. It's not dis-ease. Dis-ease is when you've ate too much.
Feeling slightly uncomfortable. Okay.
Yeah. This is a painful, torturous nightmare. You know, and that's why I'm so glad to be free of it. So yeah, Mark at 35 was gone. He was lost.
So now, let's just talk about the Mark now then. So I'm going to ask you a question about the Mark now. that might just bring out a little bit of what's life for you now. So imagine that I've created another scenario for you, and I'm sending you off on holiday for a month.
Woo.
You can go anywhere you like.
Okay.
And I've organised the flights and the accommodation, whatever suits your fantasy.
Okay.
I want to know, who would you take with you to spend that month with, that you would spend a whole month with without a crossword?
Wow. Are we talking anybody outside of family?
No, it can be anybody in family. Who would you spend a month with, that you would, taking away all the stress of everything else, who would you spend that month with that you wouldn't have a crossword with?
Do you know something? Alive or dead?
Alive, preferably, because we're talking about you now.
Oh, we're not talking hypothetically, we're talking
No,
now.
we're actually talking now.
I'd like to take my wife, obviously.
Well, that's nice.
I might want to take her along. Do you know what I mean? Because we've had it hard. You know, it hasn't been the easiest of marriages. I'd like to take my children. I'd like, because in actual fact, I have 2 daughters. One who is my best friend, one who's my guide, one who helps me to see sense, and she's nearly in her 30s now. And I have another daughter who is 15, who is the complete opposite. And because of my addiction, I don't have a relationship with her. So I'd like to take her.
Okay, so you've got
we
this
could just
family unit that you would like to travel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you might not know this, but apart from what I do, helping people with their well-being and their health and so on, one of my real passions is music. I actually studied music. So I've got I have got some music questions for you. So if you were feeling a little bit sad or a little bit down in the dumps, and you wanted to have, because this is a light-hearted conversation,
Okay, cool.
What music would you put on in your iPod or whatever it is? What piece of music would you put on to make yourself feel more light-hearted? So what piece of music would make you happy?
It would have to be, oh gosh, there's so many, because I listen to a broad range, but
you're only allowed one.
I'm only allowed one.
Yeah.
It would be some garage music.
Yeah, what one? Which one?
Again, it would be that Wookiee tune.
It would be that tune, would it?
It would be that tune.
Okay, because what we're doing is we're going to put together a playlist of everybody's tunes that they pick. Cool. So it has to be the tune that signifies, Mark, this is what makes me happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that tune?
Yeah, yeah, there'll be that tune.
That tune.
Definitely.
Cool. All right. Now, I've got some quick fire questions for you now.
Sure. Okay. Let me get quick fire ready. Right.
Quick fire questions.
Right.
So you can choose one or the other. So TV or radio?
Everybody's there going, he's going to say TV. TV.
TV. Fiction or non-fiction?
Fiction.
Are you the oldest, middle or youngest child?
I'm the youngest.
Youngest child. So at school, were you the goody two-shoes, the class clown, or a bit of a handful?
Class clown.
Class clown. And what's your best habit?
My best habit? Oh my gosh. Cleaning.
Cleaning. Oh, lovely. That's a cool habit to have. Okay, so what's your worst habit?
My worst habit?
Yeah.
My worst habit? I know it's quick fire. My worst habit?
Do we need to ask your wife?
Calling people back.
Well, you mean not calling people back?
Not calling people back, yeah.
Okay. Not returning calls?
Yeah, that's it. Not returning calls, yeah.
Okay, all right. And what do you do to relax?
Read. Or pray.
Okay. And do you have any nicknames?
I did have one, and it was called the Showman.
Oh.
It was called the Showman because my public speaking goes right back to when I was 10 years old.
How interesting.
And my father used to have a sound system that played at London Carnival. So he always used to give me the microphone and I used to be the MC. So I've been doing that ever since. And when I began to go on the London circuit with the bigger sound systems, and I used to compare dances, different sound system clashes and so forth, they called me the showman.
That's a great nickname.
I was an entertainer. Yeah.
Okay, so on that theme then, if we're going out together and I'm up on stage with my karaoke machine, what's your karaoke song?
Guilty, Barbra Streisand and Barry G.
Ah, we could do a duet.
Exactly.
That would be cool.
Yeah, I love that song. I love that song.
Yeah, that would be really cool. Okay, and we're getting to the end. Now, this is a very important question because, as you know, one of the things that I am very interested in is helping people to look after their heart. So not only their physical heart, but their heart from an emotional or a spiritual viewpoint as well. So I'd like you to tell us, if you wouldn't mind sharing, what you do to look after your heart. So both the physical one, if you do anything, and also emotionally, what do you do to look after your heart?
Okay. Emotionally, to look after my heart, you know, the Bible says, of all things, guard your heart, because from it flows the well springs of life. So I think that if I protect myself emotionally, I handle my emotions in the proper way when I'm aware of them. If I'm getting angry or I'm thinking on something negative too long, I'm aware of it, so I don't allow it to take me down any further. But don't get me wrong, it's not a perfect thing that happens, because sometimes I've been hit with stuff that I didn't see coming that has affected me quite badly, you know, like loss and relationships breaking down and so forth. But I'm aware of how I feel.
Yes.
And I try to turn away from that feeling by thinking in another direction.
Yeah, so it's just not staying in that place, but bringing yourself back into alignment, or whatever you want to say, into that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And physically, is there anything you do to look after your heart?
Well, over there, can you see that in the corner?
Oh yeah.
There, it's my walking machine that I just bought.
Okay.
Because I have issues with my knees and with my back, walking for ages on hard surfaces really affects me at the moment, and my hip. So I've got my walking machine, so I'll do a bit of treadmill walking while watching something motivational. But don't get me wrong, I haven't started yet.
I was going to say, it's not going to do a lot of that when it's up against the wall, unless you're going to walk up the wall.
Yeah, it's going to. I try to eat as healthy as possible. For the last nearly 2 months or so, I've cut out a lot of wheat products. I don't do pastas or rices anymore. I eat a lot more veg and stir-fried stuff. I have my antioxidant fruits in the mornings, my berry-based fruits in the mornings, like strawberries and blueberries and whatever berries there are, and banana and all the rest of it. So I try to eat healthily as well, even though I'm not looking like it, but I try to eat healthily as well.
Well, I can help.
So that's how I look after my heart. Yeah.
Cool. All right. And finally, I'd like you to share with us what's coming up soon that you're really excited about. So what things have you got happening for you?
Wow. Okay.
In life and in business.
Right. The business is expanding. Our charity is expanding. We're just about to get registered because we were a not-for-profit. Yeah. But now we're about to be registered with the Charity Commission, which isn't easy to get, to actually now become the Walk to Freedom Foundation. We're about to set up residential projects in our charity as well. We've launched a lot of our training and awareness stuff nationwide. I've got 2 books coming out. One's going to be through W.O.R.K.S World. I've got that one coming out soon with the You Are Possible, the Belief System. I've got another self-help book coming out that's going to be based upon the actual teachings that I created as a brand new recovery program for drugs and alcohol. So that's coming out as a book, and we've seen lots of successes through it. So we're bringing that out as a book soon.
What's that called?
Sorry?
What's that called?
That's going to be called Your Walk to Freedom. So we've got that coming out. The title hasn't been settled on yet, but it's going to be along that, but it's in production now. It's been proofread now. I'm going to be speaking at Maha's event in Turkey in July.
Cool.
So I'm going to be there, guys. I'm going to be there. I'm also, before that, in June, I'm going to be following a gospel team out to Italy, where I'm going to be doing some work out there with the guys out there as well. So lots going on for me.
Brilliant.
Lots going on. I'm so thankful and grateful for it. And plus, I'm working with more people, and that's the main thing.
Yeah.
Oh, and at some point, I'm going to be launching a lot of online videos and blogs and everything. So I'm going to be coming at everybody head on.
And how do we connect with you, Mark? Where do we find you?
Okay, so you can find me on Facebook. If you tap in Mark I Impossible Clark or Mark Anthony Clark, you'll get me either then. You'll see my big picture in the thing anyway, so you'll know it's me. You can get me at Twitter at I Am Possible 124. You can get me there, or you can catch our web pages, markiampossibleclark.co.uk, or my charity website, which is walktofreedom.co.uk, and you can see everything that's going on those two sites.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our light-hearted conversation.
I have loved it, Jill. Thank you so much. You're such a star. Thank you so much.
And I hope to see you real soon.
You too.
Yeah, you too. I hope to see you soon. Thank you very much for being so open with us all. And I think we've got to know you a little bit better, which was the whole idea behind this show. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
And have a great day.
You too. Take care. All the best. Bless you.
Bye.